Hello, I'm hoping everyone can hear me. I'll just wait a second for other people to join. Just wait one more minute. Right, welcome everyone to today's Instagram Live. The topic at question today is progressive overload. So, we get started. What is progressive overload? Progressive overload is a training principle used in both strength and rehabilitation, with the main concept being to increase the difficulty of an exercise or workout. By doing this, it places greater stress on both the central nervous and the musculoskeletal systems, which then forces the body to adapt to become stronger, faster, and more efficient. In terms of, it is a term that is synonymous with bodybuilding, but the principles are used across many disciplines with relevance found in weightlifting, strength training, and rehabilitation. Why progressive overload is so important is that the long and short of it is it prevents something called a plateau. A plateau is when your progress has halted, whether that's in terms of strength or endurance or even in appearance. One of the key things to consider when training is when trying to make physiological progress is not linear. So you can't make that progress every single week, whether that's strength gain, muscle mass gain, or just speed. You won't progressively increase by 2 kilos, 5 kilos, 10 kilos every single week. There will be peaks and troughs throughout your progress, um, and this is especially the case if the stimulus isn't changed. So I'll be using the term stimulus a lot. Stimulus is could be anything in terms of how much rest you have, how much weight you put on. Like there's certain principles that if you go onto our Instagram page, you'll see there was a little handout that I created a couple of weeks back before I had a technical blip before at the original time when I was meant to do this live with all the principles surrounding progressive overload that you can have a look after this live or during whenever you want really. Um, but yeah, stimulus is something that needs to be changed in order for there to be a significant change physiologically. For example, if you were to do 20 push-ups every day for 2 weeks, you might notice by the end of it, you might feel a little bit stronger. You might not need a progressive, a prolonged period of rest. Sorry, you might see some physiological changes, chest looking a bit bigger, arms looking a little bit bigger. But if you carried on doing 20 push-ups every single day for say a month, month and a half, 2 months, then you might notice that the level of change that you had the first 2 weeks was nowhere near the same or maintained that same level of change throughout the course of that month or 2 months or 3 months. Um, you might have noticed that during lockdown when we had limited equipment at home, so everyone was doing some sort of fartlek training. I mean, some sort of high intensity like HIIT training at home, which is great initially to just get some cardiovascular endurance. But if you want to get some overall muscle mass or hypertrophy, then you need that change in stimulus. Um, yeah, and I'll go into that later on in this live. But yeah, without continued increase in any parameters, you'll notice that change will either stop or become minuscule in comparison. And because the stimulus of adaptation is no longer present. So your body will maintain its progress made, but you might not see any more progress, for example. Um, so what's the ins and outs of it? How does this work? When you first start strength training, any exercise that you do will put stress on your muscle fibers, will break it down, and will regenerate when you've had ample rest, recovery, and consumed the right amount of protein, or enough protein anyway. This is essential for muscle building, and the rate of muscle building or hypertrophy occurs faster for beginners compared to more advanced lifters, due to there being a significantly greater stimulus being applied. Um, just to put that into context, so if someone's been never done any sort of training before, and then they do what would seem as baseline weight training, so just a regular bro split, if you may, just push arms, chest, shoulders, legs. If they did that with very little coaching, they'll still make a considerable amount of progress. Whereas someone who's been training for 2, 3, 4 years will need to have a more structured plan and won't be able to make as much progress as quickly as the person that's just started, as the stimulus isn't as the change in stimulus isn't as great as for someone who's been training for such a long time. Where was I? This being said, the progress it will only be there as long as the stimulus is there. Like in the previous example, the push-ups, if you make good progress with strength and potentially physical appearance, if you did 20 push-ups, but this progress will stop or become to flatline if the parameters aren't changed. So some of the important principles when it's surrounding progressive overload include focusing on form. So you might have heard everyone talk about form, 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 especially when you first go to the gym, and it's true. It's not something you should be ignoring, because if you don't do it properly, more often than not, you'll get hurt and you'll be trying to get an emergency appointment at the clinic, which will be great for us because you like to see new friendly faces, but it's not going to be great for you because you can be probably in a lot of pain. You don't want to be coming out of training, especially when you just started. You've got that excitement, you just want to keep going. But form is paramount. But making that steady progress is very important. But if it's a terrible form, then you're just waiting to get injured. When it comes to form, it's almost always up to interpretation. It depends on who you're asking and what your goals are with training. But one thing that's always advised is to be able to maintain a controlled movement pattern, to be able to control any weight, whether that's body weight, 10 kilos, 5 kilos, 20 kilos, 100 kilos. As long as you can control the movement throughout the whole range, then you're less likely to get hurt. Um, and always do your research, doing your due diligence before doing any exercise, and not just using one source is going to be beneficial in the long run, because once you understand the ins and outs of the exercise, you understand why certain things are happening, which is one of the tips that I'm going to tell you now. Is one way to suss out if any advice you're getting is good is by asking why is it good advice. So if a guy comes up to you at the gym and says, for example, oh, you shouldn't be squatting with your knees over your toes, and then you ask him, oh, why is that? More often than not, he'll be umming and ahhing saying, oh, because Big Terry told me in the gym before that I shouldn't be doing that. But is that really a good enough reason? Because one, it's just whisper, a mother's tale, right? It's just someone whispered to him and he whispered to him, but there's no actual scientific backing for why that's not the case. And just to clear things up, that's a myth. The whole knees over toes thing is all rubbish, really. But yeah, just always ask why, especially if you're new to the gym, because if the person is very knowledgeable and you ask why and they'll educate you, then that's perfect for you. But if you ask why and they're just umming and ahhing, they're stuttering, then you know that probably take their advice with a little bit of pinch of salt and then do your own research when you get home. Another thing that's quite important when working with progressive overload and just training in general is to track your workouts. I know I'm guilty of not doing it. I know almost everyone that I know is definitely guilty of just turning up to the gym and just saying, you know what, 10 kilos, I think I did this last week. Let me just do that again. Or I've done 14 kilos last week. I'll do 16 this time. It's fine. Not knowing that you did 25 kilos instead, but you just forgot. Not being able to track your workouts, you won't have that progression. You won't have that change in stimulus. That's that gradual change in stimulus that you need for you to have consistent progress. Um, yeah, and going into the gym and just picking up a weight you think you did last session is not going to be beneficial, because more often than not, you've either got it muddled up, or you've gone too light, or it's just you've forgotten how easy it was the previous session. So noting down your workouts, you'll not only be able to see how far you've come, but you'll also be able to keep yourself accountable. What I also like to advise is using something called the RPE scale. So RPE stands for rate of perceived exertion. So what that basically is, it's a 10-point scale. So 10 being that was difficult, I can't even do one more rep, and one being very, very easy. So by using that scale, you can kind of you can write down next to your workout. So say for example, you did a 5x5 on squats, and at the end of it, you're like, okay, that was very difficult. So on 50 kg, for example, and then you say you put RPE 9/10. So the next week, when you look at the weight and thought, you might think, 50 kg wasn't that bad, but then you look at your note and say it says 9/10. So more often than not, you might try it again. Same weight, same rep scheme, same sets. And then this time around, it might be RPE 7. So it's still progress. You've still progressed because that exercise becomes easier. You don't necessarily have to always increase weight, increase sets, increase reps for that stimulus to change. You just need that consistent progression, and that progression can always come in the terms of it becoming easier, because that is still progression. Um, and also another thing that I've suggested to some of my clients is to note down how they feel before a session, because everyone's been guilty of having a bad night's sleep, or not not sitting in a funny position in the office, or sitting down for too long, or standing up for too long before a session. So you're a bit stiff and a bit achy, or a bit tired, or the kids kept you up all night, or something like that. So noting how you felt before a session kind of keeps you not only accountable, but makes you realize that that little dip in your progression isn't because you've regressed and you need to go back to the drawing board and think, oh my God, why has my squat gone down 20 kilos in the past 2 weeks? Like, what's happened? If you look at why the effort was so low, is because you had 2 hours of sleep for the past 3 days before you trained, or you've not had enough water, or you've had went on a bender the night before, or whatever it is. As long as you know and you've noted down that, okay, I've done this, or I've performed badly, or I felt a bit rough in that set because I had a bad weekend. So that way you can see that like we said, there's going to be loads of peaks and troughs when you train. That trough is because you slept bad. So it's not, you can take that kind of that anomaly out of the picture, and you can see that progression, or the progression not linear. And yeah, take into account everything, every variable that could alter your progression. Another thing as well is plotting on that graph. You can also see when you need that a deload. So a deload is something that a lot of people overlook when it comes to planning their training. Um, so if, for example, you've been having good progress on every lift, you've been progressing week on week, your diet's been good, you've been drinking loads of water, you've been well rested, but it comes to a point where your lifts, nothing's changing. Like, everything's staying just the same in terms of weight, difficulty, like nothing's really changing. You're starting to, and then it starts to dip out. So you're starting to get more fatigued after exercise. You're starting to get a bit more tired. Like halfway through a rep, all these sets are getting more difficult. It's almost like your body asking for help. Like, it's just, it needs a break. So that's normally what a deload week is. So a deload week isn't a week off. You don't go to Marbella for a week and just completely relax. It's normally you working to 50% of 50 to 60% of what you were working on previously. So if that meant you were working at an RPE scale or close to failure for almost at least one set on every exercise, you will dial that down a bit. So you're still working out perfectly fine. You're still working out every day, or 3 times a week, 4 times a week, whatever your regular split is. But you've incorporated a week where your body has time to recover, but also resensitize to the stimulus. Because a lot of times your body desensitizes to stimuluses that you've had a lot of the time. So you don't a training block, you don't often see a drastic change in exercises. You probably get the core lifts, you get squat, deadlift, bench, and then you get 2, 3 accessories, or depending on what the split is, you kind of get the same bunch of exercises, so it's easier for you to track. So your body will just get used to that stimulus. So a lot of the time, the deload week is good because you can kind of you'll desensitize before the deload week. So during the deload week, you'll just reduce the volume considerably, and then when you go back up to your normal volume or taper back up, your body will resensitize to it, and you're able to progress or step back into the progress that you've made before the deload week. Um, Another thing that to take note of is to only change one thing at a time. By doing this, you're minimizing your chance of injury. For example, if you did a 50 kg deadlift, for example, from a previous session and it felt really easy, this week you decided to up this to 80 kilos, but also increase the number of reps from 3 to 8. This increase, though it doesn't seem like much, is a significant jump. And depending on your experience levels, it can be a recipe for injury. Also, increasing more than one parameter can also make it difficult to track the progress. Um, what was the exercise difficult because you changed the number of sets in the previous exercise? Or, for example, if you did squats 5 by 5 and that was the first exercise you always did on a leg day, and every week it's been going good. You've been increasing weights, or you've been increasing reps, or time and attention, or whatever you want to do in that sense. But then one week you're like, you know what, I'm going to start with leg press. I'm going to start with hamstring curls instead. And you did high reps, hypertrophy level. So you did 12, 15, 20 reps of leg extension and hamstring curls. And then you did your squats. And you realize, oh, why is it so difficult today? Like I've slept well, I've eaten well, I'm well rested, I've kept my protein targets up, but you're wondering why it's not working. So kind of need to keep that consistency so you can track that progress and see exactly where it's going. So I don't know if you guys have seen our Instagram page. I've already plugged it before, and I'll plug it again. It's fine. I created a little Instagram post about the principles of um, progressive overload. So I'll just go through that quickly. And yeah, feel free to jump onto our Instagram page, drop us a like, and then see we post every single week. So feel free to have a look at that. So one technique of progressive overload is to increase weight. That's the one thing that almost everyone knows, but just didn't know that it came under progressive overload. So increasing weight is the simplest form of progressive overload. Just lift heavier every single week, but always focus on form. You don't need to make big jumps. The 1.25 plate in a gym is your best friend. It will seem like the heaviest plate in the gym sometimes. I know a lot of guys will see a bench press, for example. You will never see a guy do a bench press and then slap on a 5 after his top set. It's always going to be those small incremental, I'll say smart guys anyway, it'll be those small incremental jumps that will lead to a greater progress because you'll prevent yourself getting hurt, you'll keep the form consistent, and you're still making progress. It's That's all that takes, that little change in stimulus that will maintain that progress throughout your training block. A second technique is to increase the number of repetitions. So increasing the intensity of the training by increasing the number of reps without sacrificing form is another simple way to progressively overload. It's one that people often overlook because they're so hell bent on increasing the weight. But just increasing, for example, if you did 5 by 5, 50 kg squats, 5 by 5 felt really easy. Instead of doing jumping up and you feel like, okay, 5 by 5 are really easy, but on the last 2, maybe 3 reps, I felt a bit tired. I didn't really, my form was starting to break down. What you can do is reduce the number of sets and then increase the number of reps in between. So your rest period in between the sets have reduced, but your overall intensity has increased because you're doing more reps of the same weight, if that makes sense. Another way you can progressively overload is by increasing the number of sets. So once you've increased the number of repetitions, you can also increase the number of sets to boost your training volume. You don't have to increase your daily sets to make progress. If you've already do 4 sets of bench and you on your allocated push/chest day, then you don't really need to add another 2 sets to progressively overload. Not only will that be exhausting, but you won't be able to perform optimally, as you won't be able to. You'll probably be like potentially compromising on form by doing 6 sets of bench press. Instead, you can just increase your weekly volume of bench press. So maybe incorporating some bench at the beginning of a shoulder day, or at the end of a back day when you've got a stable base, you can just do maybe 2 sets of that bench press just to get your body used to that increasing volume. Another technique is time and attention. This is a very underused technique where I don't think a lot of people understand the benefits you can possibly get from time and attention. Increasing the time you take to complete a repetition has been found as one of the most effective ways to achieve progressive overload without increasing load. So I always use the example of so your body is able to eccentrically load way more than concentrically load. So eccentric is the downward phase. So if it's on a bench, the downward phase on a bench. If it's on a squat, it's the downward phase of a squat. So it's the negative of a workout. So I use the example all the time of you probably won't be able to bench press 200 kilos, but you'll be able to, if I put 200 kilos in a bar and I told you to control it on the way down, most people will be able to do it, well, within reason, but most people will probably be able to do it because your body's got that capacity to hold and control that weight. And it still has the effects neurologically anyway for your body to actually see growth because of that. And a lot of studies have shown that. So you see a lot of powerlifters, for example, using holds at the end of their heavy set. So they might do a 3x3, 5x5 of 180 kilos, and then on their last set or after their last set, they'll probably do a 10-second hold of 260. So they'll just unrack it and hold it. So it gets their neurological system used to that weight, and kind of fires the neurological system to get used to it. And then when they eventually get to that stage or even close to it, it's not a shock to the body, and that motor pattern's already there. And the final way to increase, the last two phases actually, last two techniques into implementing progressive overload is to decrease rest period. So just like with increasing the number of reps and sets, decreasing rest period is another way to do it. It increases the metabolic efficiency and biases the use of fat biases use of fat as a fuel during exercise. So a lot of the times, people often when they're crunched for time, they'll do a 45-minute session and they will just keep time of their rest. So 30-second rest, 1-minute rest, whatever it might be, to keep their heart rate up and tap into that fat store to use that as the fuel for the exercise. And it seems to be a very effective way. Only problem with that I've seen is if you want to, you kind of need to compromise strength in order to achieve that level of progressive overload, because you won't be able to lift heavy and reduce the number of time or the duration of time you have during rest, because you won't be able to recover quick enough. So, and if you're lifting heavy especially, you kind of want that ample amount of rest so you can recover enough and maintain good form and good control throughout the whole exercise, because you don't want that chance of being hurt. And then the final technique is frequency of training. So just like increasing your volume, increasing your frequency and exercise over a week will be beneficial, especially as a short-term strategy. So a lot of people that I know probably, or when working people anyway, they'll be going to the gym 3, maybe 4 times a week. I'm not saying you have to go 7 times a week, because that is ridiculous. You do need ample time. Like I said at the beginning, you do need ample time to rest and recover, and sleep is paramount when it comes to training anyway. But just adding an extra day is going to be so beneficial in the long run. So it doesn't mean that you have to have a whole session that extra day. Say for example, you know that your bench press is lacking out of all your lifts. So that extra day, that might be a form check. So you just do pause bench or block bench press or something like that to get the motor patterns firing, get your body used to the pattern of bench pressing, but you're not really fatiguing yourself overly. You're not doing a 3x3 heavy bench press day to fry your central nervous system, which means that you won't be able to recover quick enough for your next session. So increasing training frequency is another way that a lot of people would implement progressive overload. Right. Final points. Benefits of overload. You will make progress. If you implement even 2 out of the 6 things that I just mentioned, you will make progress. If I had to recommend any of them, it will be tracking your training, and time and attention. Those 2 things, I think, will help your training leaps and bounds. And I think it's something that's very underplayed in the fitness community. Um, if you can progressively increase your parameters previously mentioned, like I previously mentioned to you, you will make progress whatever your goal is, whether that's speed, strength, rehab. It doesn't really matter. You will make progress if you think about one of those parameters. And there's always more than one way to progress, as previously mentioned. If you're struggling to increase weight, then you could work on the same weight but slower, or you can work on the number of sets you're doing that way. Rehab time and attention is almost bread and butter. We work with that, especially right at the beginning phase. After we get you guys out of pain, a lot of times we'll just work on time and attention because that quality of contraction is what we need for you to stay out of that injured state. So that's definitely something that we use a lot in the clinic. But it's not to say that you guys can't use it if you're not injured. You just need to. I think it's something you should implement in every lift you can do. One way you can definitely do it is I'd always say time and attention when you're warming up. So if you're working up to a top set, for example, on any lift, time and attention is normally good to try and channel in form, get breathing right, and then get used to the bar path and stuff like that. So time and attention, yeah, I think if I got a pound for every time I said time and attention in this live, I'd be a millionaire. But yeah, I'm a big advocate clearly. Limitations. As with anything to do with fitness, your diet plays a huge role in progress. As previously mentioned, protein intake needs to be maintained throughout training to see steady increase in muscle regeneration. And consistency is key. If you don't stick with it for a consistent period, and then you won't see results that you desire. Probably, and you probably blame me for it for telling you how amazing these pre-training principles are. But like with anything, it takes time. You need to put your time in, and that's exactly what the effort you get out. So as long as you're willing to put that time in, and like I said, educate yourselves and like listen and watch things that might help you along the way, that's going to make sure that you make all the progress that you aim to get. But one thing that a lot of people I've seen are vulnerable to is overtraining. So overtraining is when you get to that point where you need to have that deload, like I mentioned earlier, but you think that it's not necessary. And you just keep training and you keep training and you keep training, and a lot of the time it doesn't let you have that you push your body to a point where it doesn't allow it time to recover, and that recovery is where you make all of your progress. So you can go to the gym 7 times a week and you won't be any more jacked than a guy that goes 4 times a week if he gets more sleep than you or if he eats more than you, because that's what's going to fuel your body, right? Because it's the breakdown of muscle that needs to be built up again that's going to make you stronger, faster, healthier. Not just breaking that. If you just keep constantly break down the muscle and it doesn't have the nutrients it needs to facilitate that regrowth, then it's not going to be worth it at all. So either that deload is a must, or just tracking how your body feels is very, very key. So how you feel before every workout, how you feel after, how you feel the day after, aches and pains. If you have any questions, hop into the clinic. But yeah, you can be very vulnerable to overtraining if you don't do it smartly. So you have to kind of think your way through, and yeah, just educate yourself really as much as you can. And yeah, you can always use this live as a reference point. And yeah, we're always here to answer questions. Um, and yeah, I'll stick around for a little bit. If anyone's got any questions, feel free to put it in the comments. I hope I know how to read these comments, but I'm sure I'll figure it out. Um, yeah, I'll wait for a couple minutes if anyone's got any questions. And yeah, then I'll be on my way. Oh, you're very welcome there, Catherine. Right. So I gather there's no questions. Perfect. It was lovely talking to you guys. Like I said, if you guys got any other questions, feel free to put a comment at the bottom of this event, or message the group, and I'll definitely get back to you. But yeah, have a good night, and I hope to see you guys soon.